Hey everyone, I am back with more Sundance movie reviews and red carpet interviews for WGN Radio's WGN Plus. I'm Elysabeth Alfano, host of the TV show, web series, and podcast, The Celebrity Dinner Party. In today's podcast, I am talking about a fabulous movie, Colette. Now, I reviewed the movie Lizzie in a previous podcast, and Colette is sort of like the mate to that film, if you will, because it is also a real-life period piece about a headstrong, independent woman who goes against the societal mores of the time to speak her mind, love whom she loves, and live her life on her terms. But it's so much more than that. Before we get into it, here are a few basics. As always, to keep up to date with my celebrity interviews, you can subscribe to me on iTunes and YouTube at The Celebrity Dinner Party with Elysabeth Alfano. And check out my other YouTube channel at Fear No Art with Elysabeth Alfano. Yes, it's still me. Of course, there's always Facebook under my name and Twitter and Instagram at Dinner Party CHGO. And when in doubt, you can play it old school and find me on my website at thedinnerparty.tv. Okay, folks, let's break it down. Okay, so full disclosure, I was a French major, and I have always been a fan of the turn-of-the-century French writer Colette. I love her for her free-spirited life and because she was, as I am, a paperweight collector. Now, like most people who know the writer, I knew that Colette had won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1948 and that she had penned the famous book, Gigi, which went on to become a play starring the then-unknown Audrey Hepburn, whom Colette chose herself. Now, Gigi, of course, became also a movie with Leslie Caron. But mostly what I love about Colette, as I said before, is how she lived her life at the turn-of-the-century Paris and through her death in 1954. She was determined to make her own money through her art so that she could have personal freedom, and that was something that was unheard of for women at the time. Now, she did marry 3 times, and in the first marriage to Henri Gauthier Villard, I told you I was a French major, one more time, Henri Gauthier Villard, who's also known as Willie. This is really the main focus of the film, their marriage together, and in this marriage and in the film, she realizes who she is and what she's capable of. And through her writings and her plays, she goes on to affect all of French society. In addition to her marriages, she also had several lesbian affairs and affairs with younger men. Indeed, her life and her art mixed very well together. Now, director Wash Westmoreland does an incredible job of directing the feisty Keira Knightley, who does one of her best roles ever. I must admit, I'm not always a Keira fan, but here she really did a killer job. And it's not just Keira's. Sometimes you have a big star like her and then one person carries the entire production. And it's just not the case here. Everything is done to perfection. The set has you drenched in turn-of-the-century Paris, so you find yourself completely immersed. And Dominic West is the perfect offset to Keira, brilliantly hitting the right notes to set off Colette and send their marriage and his literary business spiraling downwards. I loved this film, and biased as I might be to the subject matter and the way she lived her life, I thought it was just an excellent piece of art. No one thing stood out or carried the film by itself. It comes together in direction, set, makeup, clothes, music, acting, writing, and the end result is a seamless, tight, gripping production. All right, back to the red carpets. So at Sundance and on the red carpet, I spoke with Ray Panthaki, who plays one of Willie's business partners in the film, and he had this to say about working with Wash.
I was just saying earlier, as an actor, you I certainly have a bucket list of directors I want to work with, and Wash has always been on there. Huge fan of his work. I've seen Queen de Serre, I'd seen Still Alice, completely blown away, and so when I got the phone call to say he wanted to meet, I was super excited.
Were you nervous?
Of course, when you respect someone so highly, it is a little bit nerve-wracking, but met with him, and then just to see his preparation, the way we talked about the movie, how prepared he was, and his film's been with him such a long time. I was completely blown away by him as a person, but also as an artist. And then just then got the phone call to say, look, the role's yours on the table if you want it. And I was just super excited, and like I said, if Wash had asked me to stand in the back of shot on one scene and that was all I was going to do in his film, I would have done it, because he's just got such a wonderful energy and he's a great artist, and I want to work with great people.
And what did you learn from him and from working with Keira?
It's just great working with so many greats on this movie. Killer Films, Bold Films, Number 9 Films, Wash, Keira, Dominic. I got to play with the greats, so it's
lucky
fun.
You. Thanks for speaking with me.
You're welcome.
Dominic West chatted with me about what attracted him to the script and why he wanted to be in the movie and how he prepared for the role of Willie.
I did read it and say yes immediately, actually. It was partly the period, right, which I love, the 1890s in Paris, and partly the fact, and mainly because it was Keira was doing it, but partly also because he's a very interesting character, a very conflicted character, in that he's fun and a bon viveur and also a bit of a sadistic monster. So they're always quite interesting parts to play.
Right, so a challenging role for you to play both sides of that coin.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I tend to get a lot of parts like this, but he was a challenge in that what he did was so awful, but in that he imprisoned her and he took her money and he sold the rights to her books and he profited from her work and called it his own. What he did was terrible, but actually in life she sort of forgave him and she loved him, and he was a forgivable, lovable kind of guy.
And how did you prepare for something like that? It's a tricky role to play.
I don't know. I read a lot about Paris. I went about Paris at the time. I went to Paris and wandered around Montmartre, but the main preparation was trying to get into these 3 fat suits that I had to put on, and that was my principal concern.
Wonderful. Thanks for speaking with me. Finally, I did get to speak with Wash Westmoreland, and he is just a delight. We talked about lots of things, including, yes, paperweights, but I'm going to let him tell you everything in his own words. I'm thrilled to speak with you because I've been waiting for someone to do the story of Colette. So you, I'm sure, went to Paris and did a lot of research on her.
A tremendous amount of research. The first step really was to read everything that Colette wrote, read all the biographies about her, and then visit the places that she lived and worked.
Okay, so I have to ask you, did you know that she was a big paperweight collector?
Of course I knew she was a big paperweight collector, and Truman Capote's short story about her really highlights that. We show the beginning of the paperweight collection in this movie because it starts when she's 19, but by the end you see a little growing paperweight collection that, of course, later in her life would grow to an enormous thing.
So when I lived in Paris, I went to the Musée des Presse-Papiers, and they have a poster of her. I don't know if you've seen that poster.
I have seen it.
So when I went there, I bought all of them. I bought like 40 posters because I wanted to make sure, because I'm sure they were going to go out of print, so I wanted to make sure they had them all. Anyway, so if you could tell me, in writing this script and directing about the life of Colette, what did you learn about her that maybe the average person doesn't know?
Oh, I think there's a tremendous amount about Colette that the average person doesn't know. She was so groundbreaking in terms of gender, in terms of sexuality. It's like the modern age. People think of it as like, oh, telephones were being invented, cars were being invented, but also new concepts about gender and sexuality where the cement was wet, and Colette was one of the people drawing in the cement very bravely. She's one of the first women to write very explicitly and without any shame about sex. And
no holding back.
No holding back.
Although she was held down herself until she overcame this, so sort of a precursor to feminism.
Well, that is really what the movie is about. It's about her relationship with Willie, Henri Gauthier Villars, her first husband, and it's about her struggling to get out from under his huge ego. Basically, she was writing books, he was claiming credit for them, and at a certain point that had to give.
And incredible because she's such a force to be reckoned with, so it's hard to imagine that she could ever be kept down, but of course that only lasted so long.
Yes, Colette was a force of nature, but she grew into that. When she was 19, she was living in Saint-Sauveur. Willie came from Paris. He was like the big literary figure from, the capital of France. Of course, there was she was going into Paris as an underdog. But what you see is how she kind of uses her natural moxie and her, smarts and her intellectual power to overcome it.
I understand that this film took you 16 years to make. Why so long?
It took 16 years to make because a lot of people, when we first pitched it, were like, oh, woman, period piece, not sure that's commercial. And then also, Colette had a relationship with the Marquise de Belleboeuf, who was a woman who completely male-identified, who we might see as a forebear of today's trans community. Richard and I were very excited about this aspect of the story, but a lot of people thought it was really way out there. In a way, the world had to catch up with Colette's story for it to come out.
Wow, well, good for you for sticking with it. Any words of advice to directors who just can't get it made?
I say just never say die. If you have a script, just keep working on it, just keep pushing it, just keep believing in it, and just don't stop until it hits the big screen.
Luckily, thanks for speaking with me.
Well, thanks. It's been lovely talking to you.
Now, sadly, Keira did not walk the red carpet and was really just there long enough for a picture or two. But despite that disappointing fact, I do have to say, everybody, if you haven't gotten it already, this movie is a must-see. And I don't know when it's going to be in theaters. I don't think, at least as of the recording of this podcast, that it has a distribution deal, but it's going to get one, that's for sure. And I'm guessing it's going to come out just about Oscar time next year. So be on the lookout. Until then, you can always subscribe to my iTunes and YouTube channels at The Celebrity Dinner Party with Elysabeth Alfano and my other YouTube channel, Fear No Art with Elysabeth Alfano. There's Facebook under my name and Twitter and Instagram at Dinner Party CHGO, and then there's always, of course, my website, thedinnerparty.tv. The editor on this pod is Diana Penglaze. I hope you've subscribed because there's lots more Sundance news to come. And until then, as always, don't forget to be vegan.